Welcome. Today we're going to be looking at the lore and history of the iconic Crawford Street Mansion, one of Angel's residencies in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. The setting was central to events in the early seasons of the show, specifically the second and third, playing host to moments of heartbreak, redemption, and of course, the supernatural. In our examination of this setting, we'll take a look at the in-universe lore and storylines, as well as the actual history of the real-world building used in the show, and finally, we'll theorise about how Angel actually managed to obtain a mansion without, obviously, purchasing it. So to begin with, let's take a look at how Angel was living before he moved into the mansion, and how he changed along the way. His initial digs weren't quite so glamorous, more of a normal living situation in a nondescript apartment, which made its debut in Season 1 of Buffy. This small, shadowy home was of course a physical space for Angel to live in, but also as a vehicle for the writers to express and show some of his inner turmoil. Ostensibly, his apartment was intended to be a place where light and darkness coexisted. It didn't have a lot of screen time, but did play host to events that set the tone for Angel's journey throughout the series, both as a vampire cursed with a soul and as Buffy's tragic love, and notably, was the scene of one of the most pivotal moments in the entire series. Angel's apartment was first introduced in the 7th episode of Season 1, handily titled Angel, where it very quickly provided an obvious contrast to the Californian sunshine of Sunnydale. Tucked away from prying eyes, the apartment was a dark, windowless refuge, obviously important for a vampire to avoid the sun, but also served as a metaphorical reflection of Angel's isolation from the world. Here, in this lonely apartment, we would learn that Angel grappled with his guilt over evil actions from his past. This apartment became a recurring backdrop for Angel's quiet moments of introspection, as well as his interactions with Buffy and the Scooby Gang. The space was sparsely decorated, yet its minimalist aesthetic was reflective of Angel's character, a man weighed down by decades of regret, striving to simplify his life in the present. As hinted at earlier, the apartment was the scene of a number of notable events. Let's take a look at some of them. Firstly, in Season 1, one of the more dramatic moments in Angel's apartment occurred when his sire Darla paid him a visit. She attempted to lure Angel back into the fold of the Master and the Order of Aurelius. This confrontation was a vehicle for the writers to portray Angel's resolve to resist his darker instincts, setting up the complex dynamic between him and Darla that would unfold in later seasons of both Buffy and Angel. Next up, on another occasion, Xander Harris, typically wary of Angel, made an uncharacteristic visit to the apartment in the season finale to persuade him to intervene and prevent Buffy from being killed by the Master, evidence of Angel's growing connection to the Scooby Gang and his willingness to step into the role of protector. And a whole season later, when Buffy sought refuge in Angel's apartment during the What's My Line episodes, it was the setting for the first meeting between Buffy and Kendra. Their clash, caused by the fact that Kendra witnessed Buffy and Angel kissing and mistakenly believed they were both vampires, would lead to the reveal that Buffy's temporary death in Season 1 did actually activate a new vampire slayer. In the following episode, Ted, after Angel was weakened by the rite of regeneration involving Drusilla, Buffy tended his wounds in his apartment. This intimate moment clearly showed the deepening bond between them as Buffy's compassion for Angel grew. And in one of the entire series' most significant moments, Buffy and Angel, to put it in the 19th century vernacular, consummated their relationship for the first time in this apartment. This act of love inadvertently triggered the curse that stripped Angel of his soul, setting the stage for the re-emergence of the infamous vampire he used to be, Angelus. The transformation from love to torment is one of the most tide-shifting moments in the entire Buffy run. Angel, our soulmate, was now the season's big bad. Clearly, because Buffy is a fictional show and didn't take place in real life, it had writers behind the scenes, and those writers wanted to utilise everything at their disposal to aid exposition. In this way, Angel's apartment was far more than simply a physical dwelling. It was a narrative device carefully crafted by the writers to mirror and expose his internal conflict. Its windowless darkness was evocative of his vampiric past, while its role as a sanctuary for Buffy juxtaposed this with his efforts to be good. Ultimately, the apartment served as a narrative stepping stone in Angel's journey toward redemption, marking the beginning of his path as a protector and ally. However, Angel would not remain at the apartment forever. he would, as I mentioned earlier, unfortunately fall to evil. His move from the apartment to the Crawford Street Mansion was marked by a transitional period where he first joined Spike and Drusilla in the abandoned factory hideout. This industrial lair was a central location during Angelus' villainy in Season 2. It served as a staging ground for important events like the resurrection of the Judge, the constant teasing of Spike around his affections for Drusilla, and crucially Angelus' psychological torment of Buffy. The factory's eventual destruction by Giles, prompted by Angelus' murder of his girlfriend Jenny Calendar, was the catalyst for another change of his living arrangements. After the destruction of the factory, the trio and their vampire crew needed a new place to call home. They settled on the Crawford Street Mansion. This magnificent gothic piece of real estate became their new lair in the latter half of Season 2, and later served as Angel's residence after his return from Acathla's Hell Dimension the following season. The mansion's grandeur and eerie isolation made it the perfect setting for the dramatic and supernatural events that unfolded within its walls. The decaying beauty was a perfect backdrop for the unholy trio's malevolent presence. Its labyrinthine halls and towering windows added to its gothic vibes, making it an iconic location in the series. So what happened here to make it such a significant location? One of the more noteworthy moments in the mansion I briefly mentioned before came at the end of Season 2 when Angelus reawakened the demon Acathla, whose purpose was to open a portal to a hell dimension. This act of potential world-destroying insanity made Angelus' cruelty pretty clear, and set the stage for one of Buffy's greatest challenges, defeating the man she loved to save the world. Buffy's ultimate decision to impale Angel with a blessed sword, sacrificing him to save us all, was a defining moment in both their arcs, and as a result, the mansion lay dormant until his unexpected return the following season. When Angel mysteriously re-emerged from the Hell Dimension, he was feral and disoriented, having been tormented there for an unspecified amount of time. The mansion became a sanctuary for him, a place of recovery and self-discovery, a perfect stage for his redemption and to deal with his internal struggles. Returning at first in an animalistic, beast-like state, naked and vulnerable, he eventually transformed back to his older soulful self, now more guilt-ridden and seeking redemption, and cutting a very lonely figure within the mansion's walls. As an aside, it is interesting to consider that beast-like Angel had the compos mentis in consideration to don a pair of trousers and shoes when out in public. Another key event that took place at the mansion occurred a few episodes later. Buffy and Faith's confrontation over the Glove of Myhnegon with Gwendolyn Post, a Watcher who was previously expelled from the Watchers' Council, marked a turning point in their relationship, with the first signs of their alliance beginning to fracture. The first evil, taking the forms of Angel's past victims, haunted him within the mansion in the episode Amends. These encounters forced Angel to confront his sins and tested his resolve to continue his path of redemption. Later in the season, when Angel was dying from the effects of the Killer of the Dead poison, Buffy forced him to drink her blood to survive. This selfless act, another key moment taking place at the mansion, shone a light on the depth of their bond and the sacrifices they made for one another. In some ways, the Crawford Street Mansion was a character in its own right, embodying themes of loss, redemption, and resilience. Its grand yet decaying architecture was evocative of Angel's struggle to reconcile his past and present. As a lair, a sanctuary, and a battleground, it played a central role in the Buffyverse, and as we've shown so far, was the setting of some of the series' most unforgettable moments. But the story doesn't end there. Well, it does in terms of Buffy and its use in the show, but there's also an interesting story when we look at the mansion in real life. How did it come to be? What's the real life history of this place? With that in mind, let's take a look behind the scenes at the real life mansion that served as this iconic location. In 1923, Frank Lloyd Wright, an American architect, designer, writer and educator, embarked on one of his most ambitious projects, the design of the Ennis house. Commissioned by Charles and Mabel Ennis, the residence was intended to serve as both a home and a showcase of Wright's innovative textile block system. This method involved using interlocking concrete blocks, a technique that allowed Wright to create intricate patterned surfaces that mimicked ancient architecture. The Ennis house is a really interesting example of Mayan revival architecture, a style that gained popularity in the early 20th century. Design was heavily influenced by the Pu-Uk style Maya temples, particularly those found in Uxmal. The house's exterior featured 27,000 perforated and patterned concrete blocks made from decomposed granite. These blocks reflected Wright's belief in integrating architecture with the natural environment. Of course, beyond the actual history of the building itself, it's no wonder that it has a rich history as a setting in television and in films. Its striking design and dramatic location have made it a popular filming location for nearly a century. Obviously, as we've already explored, for Buffy fans, the Ennis house is instantly recognisable as the Crawford Street Mansion. However, its Hollywood career actually began much earlier with the 1933 film Female, and reached iconic status with its appearance in the 1959 horror classic House on Haunted Hill. Then, in Ridley Scott's 1982 film Blade Runner, the house's exterior served as Deckard's apartment. The Ennis house's influence extends beyond the screen. Its unique aesthetic has inspired countless imitations in film, television, and architecture. Elements of its design have been recreated in movies like The Rocketeer and Mulholland Drive. It has even appeared in animated form such as in South Park and The Venture Brothers. Obviously, with the house having appeared in so many films and TV shows, there's a lot of interest from fans to view the property. While the house remains a private residence, its cultural significance has led to efforts to make it accessible to the public. Easements have been established to allow public viewing on select days each year. Bringing our focus back to the Buffyverse, it's interesting to look at how settings are used to contrast between different characters. In the fandom, Angel and Spike are compared and contrasted almost daily. Two vampires, both infamous, both iconic, yet worlds apart when it comes to their personalities, but also their living arrangements. While Angel's taste leans towards refined and sophisticated, Spike's spaces reflect his gritty punk rock essence. Why the stark difference? It may seem obvious, but let's dig into this and have a look at how their choices are reflective of who they are. Angel's living spaces, from his Sunnydale apartment to the Crawford Street Mansion, evoke the idea of a character that leans towards introspection, isolation, and yet, paradoxically, a desire to reconnect with humanity. His choice of refined furnishings and carefully maintained spaces suggests to me, and others who've discussed this online, a need for control and a longing for peace. Whether it's his neatly decorated apartment or the grand mansion he occupies after returning from Acathla's dimension, Angel's homes seem to serve as sanctuaries, places where he can process his guilt and strive for redemption. Of course, when he isn't being evil. It's no surprise that fans have noted the pretty obvious contrast between Angel's grand dwellings and Spike's more chaotic, grimy spaces. Some fans online have even expressed the sentiment that Angel's mansion looks like it could be ready to be sold on the market to the highest bidder tomorrow. It's practically ready for a Hollywood elite-style open house. Spike's living arrangements, on the other hand, are far less polished, to say the least. From a makeshift lair in an abandoned factory to a crypt furnished with scavenged items, Spike's homes, to be kind about it, tie in with his rejection of societal or human norms and his preference for bare bones living. However, fans have pointed out the charm in Spike's setup, with even some pointing out that as long as he has a chair, a TV, pack of smokes, and of course, a working fridge fully stacked with blood, he's all set. To put it in TLDR form, he's just looking for a place to crash. The Buffy fandom has also debated the connection between their choices of dwelling and their histories as humans. One interpretation posits that Angel's upbringing in a striving middle-class environment is mirrored in his pursuit of refinement and comfort, while Spike's privileged background and his later rejection of that privilege for a rebellious lifestyle is echoed in his grittier, less polished dwellings. Angel's yearning for humanity contrasts sharply with Spike's rebellious streak. Some fans have compared Angel's refined and introspective demeanour to the brooding elegance often associated with classic vampires, while Spike's untamed and chaotic nature evokes a more punk rock ethos. This dichotomy is evident in how they interact with the world around them. Angel's preference for order and beauty aligns with his quest to reconnect with his human side, whereas Spike's rougher aesthetic is emblematic of his total rejection of his previous former human self. Other discussion online emphasised Spike's practicality, pointing out that his script was strategically linked to Sunnydale's underground tunnels. This connection allowed him to navigate the town safely during daylight hours, prioritising function over aesthetics. As some fans have pointed out, while Spike's crypt wouldn't win any awards for luxury, it served its purpose effectively. The implantation of the Initiative's behaviour modification chip drastically affected Spike's ability in Season 4 to secure better living conditions. With his capacity to harm humans removed, he had to depend on scavenging and occasional help from others. Fan discussion noted that the chip forced Spike to adopt a more resourceful and isolated lifestyle, making a crypt a fitting and practical choice for his circumstances. Another interesting aspect of how the writers put across the differences between Angel and Spike is the use of flashbacks to shed light on their contrasting perspectives on wealth and comfort. In one notable moment, Angelus reprimands Spike for attracting too much attention, a mistake that forces them into a humbler hideout. This scene is a pretty on-the-nose demonstration of Angelus's preference for order and refinement, which is totally different to Spike's more chaotic and impulsive nature. We could interpret Angel's living spaces as extensions of his brooding, solitary nature, contrasting with Spike's dishevelled crypts. Spike's choices of habitations help with grounding his character, making him more relatable in their imperfection. It almost feels like Angel's homes are carefully maintained sanctuaries, while Spike's untidy crypts are more authentically him. The thing is though, we could debate all day about what means what when it comes to Spike and Angel and who they are as people, but the really burning question from fan discussion is this: how was Angel able to secure and maintain ownership of the mansion over the 2 seasons? One pretty common theory suggests that the mansion on Crawford Street was abandoned by its previous owners. Sunnydale's reputation as a supernatural hotspot likely deterred wealthy residents from staying in the area. Its proximity to a cemetery, one of 12, and the town's unusually high mortality rate, to say the least, would have made it an unappealing place to live. Fans have speculated that the mansion had likely been vacant for years, making it a logical choice for Angelus when scouring for the new lair in Season 2. It's easy to believe that Angelus and the rest of Spike's crew could have deterred any government officials from trying to evict them. So, when Angel returned in Season 3 and the mansion was still empty, he became a squatter. As a vampire, he wouldn't need to worry about conventional living expenses like utilities or rent, and Sunnydale's chaotic nature likely meant property laws weren't strictly enforced. I personally feel that Angel's immortal status was pretty helpful in allowing him to bypass the usual struggles of home ownership, turning squatting into a viable long-term solution. Obviously, as long as he could persuade an electrician to wire the place up for his handy blood fridge. So how did Angel get the money to maintain occupancy of his mansion and ward off any unsuspecting civilian visitors? The most likely answer is a combination of abandonment and creative squatting. But the ambiguity allows fans to project their own theories. What do you think? Let me know down below. So, as we've seen, the Crawford Street Mansion served as a backdrop for some of the most pivotal moments in Buffy, and, as we've discussed, it could also be viewed as a reflection of Angel's internal journey, while also serving simply as a practical lair for a vampire in Sunnydale. Ultimately, as much as the mansion was part of the show itself, and a real place with its own history, it has also been a source of interest for fans, sparking a lot of chat online. What are your theories related to this location? Have you ever visited the Ennis mansion in real life? Is there anything I've missed? Make sure to pop your thoughts in the comments, and with that, we'll wrap this up. See you in the next video.